Late afternoon, mid-December, in Sydney's eastern suburbs. A car stops on Ocean Street, Woollahra. In the open boot, a glimpse of a hand-painted ISIS flag. And at 6:17 p.m, a father and son begin the final stage of a journey with a terrible purpose. Past Bondi Junction, down Old South Head Road, and to Bondi, the heart of Sydney's Jewish community, where it's the first night of Hanukkah, the Festival of Light. Whether anything more could have been done to stop the killers is the focus of today's interim report from the Royal Commission into Anti-Semitism.
Commissioner Bell has found that our existing legal and regulatory frameworks did not hinder our agencies in preventing or responding to the Bondi attack, and that no urgent changes are required to keep Australians safe.
The federal and New South Wales governments say they will implement the report's recommendations.
The reality is for a state government is that its highest responsibility is to protect its people, and on December the 14th last year we didn't do that, and we take responsibility for that today.
The report details the rising anti-Semitism after the Hamas terror attack on Israel on October 7, 2023, and the immediate public hostility towards Australian Jews.
Not only were we seeing Israel targeted, but we're seeing Australia's Jewish population targeted as somehow supporting Israel and somehow collectively responsible.
In August 2024, ASIO raised Australia's terrorism threat level from possible to probable. As arsonists and vandals attacked synagogues and Jewish schools, ASIO's Director General warned of the growing threat to Jewish people.
It's certainly raised its ugly head. We're concerned it's not yet plateaued.
Funding for Australia's security and intelligence agencies had increased to $14.3 billion in 2025. Yet the proportion of that money allocated to counter-terrorism between 2020 and 2025 significantly declined.
A question for examination will be whether the resourcing for counter-terrorism was adequate in the deteriorating security environment.
Well, no one can deny that counter-espionage and countering foreign interference in Australia's politics are important things, but the problem is that counter-terrorism never went away, and certainly after the horrific Hamas attacks in October 2023, radicalisation and terrorist violence was right back on the menu.
The detail of what exactly ASIO and other agencies were doing remains secret.
Well, I suppose the fact that 5 of 14 recommendations are confidential and the public can't see them, I hope that's not an indication of the Royal Commission's final report, because really a whole lot of its value is not just doing good work, but it's the public understanding the good work it's done.
At the start of summer, ASIO issues annual holiday season alerts. In previous years, these included specific warnings about the risk to Hanukkah celebrations. In late 2025, with anti-Israel marches in full swing across the nation, ASIO's holiday alert said escalations in the Middle East were more likely to provoke protests rather than terrorism. And this year, there was no mention of Hanukkah.
My feeling about it is the national conversation focused so much on social cohesion and what words were people using, what slogans were they using. Maybe that harder counter-terrorism edge got a bit lost in the noise, because it turns out it wasn't all about community cohesion. It was about some individuals who were motivated to go to violence.
At Bondi, security preparations had been underway for months for a family event for up to 1,000 people on the evening of December 14, Hanukkah by the Sea. A week prior, the Jewish community's own security team, the CSG, passed on its threat assessment for the event.
A terrorist attack against the New South Wales Jewish community is likely, and there is a high level of anti-Semitic vilification.
It requested a police presence. The precise New South Wales Police response that day has been redacted from the report. But police told the Royal Commission that 3 General Duties officers and 1 supervisor were here that day. The local area commander came in and out. The community security guards were unarmed. That's the law in New South Wales.
The Jewish Community Security Group had attempted to engage numerous times and occasions with New South Wales Police about their concerns that there was a heightened likelihood of an attack, and significant questions emerge out of how seriously that was taken.
Police considered the information provided by the CSG. The police provide their own risk assessment. So as an organisation, we assess events based on intelligence and other information we may have. The policing response was provided on that evening. The Royal Commissioner has said that she'll examine that incident closely, and I think it's appropriate that she does.
Facebook ads for Hanukkah by the Sea promised face painting, rock climbing and animal petting, starting at 5 p.m, with the lighting of the menorah set for 7. The killers arrived at the Festival of Light at 6:50.
The Coalition is offering bipartisan support to implement the recommendations in the Royal Commission's interim report. Senator Jonathan Duniam is the Shadow Home Affairs Minister. Senator Duniam, welcome to 7:30.
Sarah, thanks for having me.
Have you been offered a full briefing, first of all, on the interim report from the Royal Commission?
As at today, we as an opposition haven't been offered a full briefing. My office has reached out to receive that full briefing. We believe it is in the national interest to have a bipartisan approach to matters of national security, and of course that includes, in a confidential basis, receiving information about those recommendations and parts of the interim report that aren't yet publicised. I think it is important we have access to those so we can make an informed decision in response to what the Commission has thus far uncovered.
Let's talk about what's in the report that's available to us for now. Talking about the report earlier today, you said the Bondi attack could have been avoided. So based on your reading of the report, what specific action or decisions could have stopped the terrorists carrying out the attack?
The most glaring of the weaknesses identified in the interim report, of course, relate to the non-decision by government to effectively focus the role of the part-time counter-terror coordinator in the Australian government to purely focusing on matters counter-terrorism, to ensure that efforts across government agencies, ASIO, AFP, Home Affairs and all the other agencies at a federal level that operate in this sphere, along with state and territory agencies as well, are all focused on ensuring that they are sharing information, that they are collaborating and that they are putting in place every measure to ensure that events like this don't occur. It was a key recommendation out of the interim report. And of course, in an environment where we have a terror threat level that has since August of 2024 been at probable, it strikes me as odd that the government didn't refocus that role to be 100% focused on counter-terror efforts.
You say refocus, and of course that was a decision taken under the Liberal government, but I appreciate we are post the raising of the threat level, but you're not saying that that would have changed the outcome, the behaviour of the terrorists at Bondi, if that role had been singularly focused on counter-terrorism instead of counter-terrorism and counter-espionage?
Well, of course, changing the behaviour and actions of individuals who are intent on doing harm is something that is impossible to do, but responding to threats and identifying them early is what that role and a government focused on counter-terror efforts in a coordinated and cohesive way should be able to deliver. So that is what we're focused on here. I mean, there are always going to be bad faith actors and evil individuals who will seek to do harm for causes unknown to us or foreign to us. And on that basis, it is about finding them. It's about thwarting any plans they may have on foot, and that's where information sharing and intelligence arrangements are imperative, and under a more cohesive arrangement with a counter-terrorism coordinator who can navigate all of these issues at a federal level and in partnership with state and territory law enforcement agencies, we would have a better chance of knocking these things on the head before they become the issues that we saw like unfold in Bondi last year.
And just on the question of funding, because the report does note that while funding for security agencies went up overall, it went down for counter-terrorism. Was it ASIO's decision on its priorities or the government's funding that was at fault?
Well, I think at the end of the day, government make a decision about how they allocate funding, and as I understand it in the interim report, the notes indicate that overall funding for the national intelligence community did go up, but in effect, funding for counter-terror efforts was effectively static or growing at a lower proportional rate. That is a decision of government, and how that funding is allocated is a matter for them. Of course, it is important to note the period of time we're talking about here was around 2020 through to 2025. In 2019, the ISIS caliphate did collapse in March of that year. And, of course, the threat environment changed, and the government's focus around what we should be doing here in Australia to counter that effect of ISIS and its influence globally was shifted. But again, the world is very, as you said earlier on, the world is very different then to what it is now, and indeed post October 7, 2023. The world changed, the threat environment changed, and accordingly, government should have adapted to those changed circumstances, including with resourcing for counter-terror efforts.
I want to talk about the guns question, because the report says that all governments, state and federal, should prioritise the national gun buyback scheme put forward by the government after the attack. Do you support that?
Well, obviously, we as an opposition had concerns about the gun law reforms more broadly that the government had proposed. We moved amendments to try and ameliorate unintended consequences. We failed in our pursuit. Labor and the Greens voted the package through. It is the law of the land, including the mechanism for the gun buyback. It is now over to the government to implement those laws in partnership with state and territory governments. We're not going to stand in the way of that. We were very clear at the time, though, of course, Sarah, that we didn't believe gun law reform was the singular answer that was going to deal with anti-Semitism in this country.
I don't think anybody is suggesting it's the singular answer to anti-Semitism. But just to be clear on the gun buyback question, do you urge those states that are holding out on the gun buyback to get on with it and conclude the arrangements for the numbers of guns and the licensing of guns for Australians?
Well, I'm the Federal Shadow Home Affairs Minister, and I'd urge my counterpart Tony Burke and his colleague, the Prime Minister, to get on and do what they promised they would, what they've passed laws to enable. The ball is in their court. Yes, they're working with state and territory governments. I'm not going to give them gratuitous advice. I will call on the government to do what they said they would, what is recommended in this interim report. We're not going to stand in the way of that. And I would just, on your point around no one asserting that gun law reform might stamp out anti-Semitism, it does beg the question why, of course, it was the government's singular response in the early days post-Bondi to this situation. I mean, this government, of course, was dragged kicking and screaming to have a royal commission, and of course it was a lot of effort on the part of many in the community that led them to introduce those hate laws that were ultimately passed. But that is the claim that is made around those laws having been some sort of solution to the issue that was faced in Bondi last year.
Of course, any of the changes suggested by the interim report could have been made by the government straight after the attack in Bondi. I noticed the report talks about the fact that the war in Iran is likely to increase the attacks on the Australian Jewish community. How vulnerable does that community remain?
Well, the community clearly remains very vulnerable, and you only have to talk to members of it around the concerns they continue to have, the threats they feel. Anti-Semitism has not gone away. And, of course, this is only an interim report. I hope that there are recommendations that actually go to how a government can be better equipped to actually deal with these issues. I think the point you make is right. A number of the changes that the interim report recommends now could have been dealt with not just after Bondi, but indeed prior to. And that is the point. Some of these things could have and should have been done post, at the very least, August of 2024, when the terror threat level was raised, and when people like Mike Burgess, the Director General of ASIO was saying that anti-Semitism is our #1 threat. To that end, the community were telling us for a long time they were concerned about what could happen or what might happen, and sadly what did happen at Bondi. And so they remain very vulnerable, they remain in need of protection and support, and this is why it is imperative that we don't just tick the boxes and move on, but take this seriously and vigilantly implement what the Royal Commission recommends.
Just a question on your new immigration policy. In presenting it, the Coalition has said that you prefer people coming from liberal democracies, you warn about people coming from bad countries. Your policy essentially could have prevented Bondi's hero, Ahmed al-Ahmed, from coming to Australia. He was living in Syria under the control of Assad, a bad country, the kind of country that you don't want people coming here from.
Well, I think what needs to be made very clear here is that liberal democracies, as opposed to dictatorships, theocracies, for example, have people who have values generally more akin to ours as a nation. That's not to say that every resident in a country that is ruled by a system that doesn't respect our way of life, our rule of law, equality between the sexes, for example, is a bad person. But where people come from a jurisdiction where there is a greater risk that they may hold views counter to what we hold dear in Australia, like, as I said before, the rule of law and respect for democratic outcomes, then there will be greater screening put in place. We need to make sure that the people that come into this country, and there are the overwhelming majority of people that want to come and start a new life in this country, want the best for themselves and want to join a country that is great. Including the Bondi hero you mentioned.
Senator Duniam, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Sarah, very much.